Part 1. Check for Understanding. Introduction. The 4 tasks of Check for Understanding. Perhaps the most salient characteristic of a great teacher is her ability to recognize the difference between "I taught it" and "they learned it." She might have explained to her class the significance of the Stamp Act as a precursor to the American Revolution, but what matters, she knows, is whether her students understand it. As most teachers have learned through experience, a series of carefully planned and well-executed lessons may or may not always cause this to happen. The gaps that emerge between what was taught and what's been learned may even not be the teacher's fault. Fault, in many ways, is irrelevant. To teach the student mastery is the job, and ensuring that it happens is our challenge as teachers. The challenge of getting reliably to "they learned it" by reacting to misunderstandings as they emerge and then finding the best way forward is an immense one, but at least it has a name: Check for Understanding, CFU. Although I'd been familiar with that phrase for years and included it as a technique in the first version of this book, it took me much longer to understand the full nature of the tasks implicit in CFU. The barrier to their successful execution is in pragmatic details more than philosophy. It's less that there are thousands of teachers who fail to say to themselves, "Gee, I really ought to be assessing what they're learning as I teach," than it is that there are thousands of teachers with 300 other things to do at any given moment during a lesson. A sticky note on your dashboard with "Remember to really make sure they're learning" written on it isn't likely to make you teach better. The champions of CFU win by making a habit of small intentional habits, some of which might seem trivial, but when applied consistently and in coordination, result in a reliable and trusty safety net for student learning. My discussion of CFU in these chapters is limited to real-time actions, things teachers do before the final bell rings, that is, during the course of a single lesson. After students have filed out the doors, teachers have a lot of great tools for determining how much their students have learned: tests, quizzes, essays, and homework, even exit tickets, Technique 26. Most teachers use some or all of these. They're worthwhile, of course, so I encourage you to continue. But my focus here is on tools that teachers can use to figure things out sooner, before students leave the room and the lesson is over. This is important because misunderstandings don't merely linger but often snowball, becoming more entrenched and gathering further misconceptions. Recognizing and addressing them quickly keeps them from getting worse, and does so at a lower cost. A full lesson lost is a high price to pay in terms of missed learning. 10 minutes lost is easier to fix. There's a decent analogy in driving. Good drivers, research says, check their mirrors every 5 seconds or so. They're seeking to identify and remedy misunderstandings on the road as quickly as possible, by switching lanes, say, or yielding to oncoming traffic. That's always better than making repairs after the fact, no matter how good the body shop. Over time, the techniques of CFU have coalesced, for me, around 3 broader tasks. The first is data gathering. Here, efficiency is essential, especially given the time constraints of real-time teaching. If you had 20 minutes to gather data every time you wanted it, referring here to the 20 minutes, of course you could figure out how your students were doing. The key is being able to do it in 2 minutes. If you can't gather data quickly and simply, you're less likely to do it at all. There are 2 ways that teachers seek to gather data: via questioning and via observation. Chapter 1 discusses the tools necessary to do these efficiently and well. Chapter 2 looks at the next 2 tasks implicit in CFU after data has been gathered: acting on the data and building a culture of error. In many ways, these tasks represent different types of challenge than those in the first chapter. Whereas the challenges of gathering data are logistical and pragmatic, the challenges of the second and third tasks are as much psychological as technical. Acting on the data often involves immediately changing the course of the action to respond to lack of mastery. An array of factors creates the incentive for us to bury the data, to see evidence of struggle, but ignore it. After examining strategies for combating these incentives, I'll take on another psychosocial challenge: making the CFU process a shared endeavor between teachers and students. In a classroom, where one of a teacher's primary tasks is to see and react to mistakes, The degree to which students readily expose those mistakes, rather than try to hide them, directly influences a teacher's success. To encourage students to more willingly expose their errors, great teachers make it safe to be wrong. They build a culture of error that respects, normalizes, and values learning from errors. These sections of Chapter 2 describe an area of CFU that I didn't know existed when I wrote the first edition of this book. This isn't to say that the champion teachers whom I was watching didn't understand it. When I go back and look at the footage of their classrooms now, I see them clearly using the ideas I now understand. It's just that I didn't notice them then. Although I discuss building this culture of error in the second chapter, many teachers will likely want to start implementing it even before they begin gathering data. Champions, I now see, start fostering a culture of error in the first hours their students spend in their classroom.